When my husband, Matt, and I first moved to Willow Creek, it felt like we had stepped into a dream. The neighborhood was picture perfect. Rows of charming houses with neatly trimmed lawns, flower beds bursting with vibrant colors, and streets so quiet you could hear birds chirping in the distance. It seemed like the kind of place where life slowed down just enough for you to enjoy every moment. We were thrilled. Our kids ran around the yard, laughing as they explored their new home, while Matt and I stood on the porch, taking it all in. For the first time in years, we felt like we'd finally found our forever home. But there was one thing about Willow Creek that stood out more than anything else: the Homeowners Association, or HOA. From the moment we arrived, it was clear they ran this neighborhood like a well-oiled machine. Flyers greeted us at every mailbox, welcoming us warmly, but also reminding us of the rules we needed to follow. There was even a glossy packet waiting on the kitchen counter when we walked in, a thick booklet titled * Willow Creek Living Standards *. Flipping through its pages felt overwhelming. There were rules for everything: what color your front door could be, only neutral shades, how high your grass could grow, no taller than 2 inches, and even which types of holiday decorations were allowed. No inflatables, no flashing lights. At first, I thought it was funny, quirky even. Who wouldn't want to live in a place that looked like it belonged in a magazine? But as days turned into weeks, I started noticing little things, like the way neighbors would glance over their fences, silently judging if someone's lawn wasn't perfectly green, or if a car was parked in the driveway overnight. It wasn't just pride, it was control. And honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we weren't planning to break any rules. We just wanted to settle in and enjoy our lives. Then came the horses. Matt and I had always loved animals, and moving to a property with 5 acres gave us the space to bring Daisy and Buck into our lives. They weren't just pets, they were part of the family. Watching them graze peacefully in the paddock became one of my favorite parts of the day. The kids adored riding them, and Matt spent hours brushing their coats until they gleamed in the sunlight. Everything felt perfect, until the letter showed up. One morning, as I opened the front door to grab the newspaper, I noticed an envelope tucked under the mat. It was addressed to the residents of 12 Willow Lane in bold letters. My stomach tightened as I unfolded the paper inside. It was from the HOA, and it read, * Concerns have been raised regarding livestock compliance on your property. Please ensure adherence to guidelines outlined in Section 4.7 of the Willow Creek Living Standards. * Livestock compliance. What did that even mean? I reread the sentence twice, anger bubbling up inside me. Daisy and Buck weren't some random farm animals. They were ours. We took care of them, loved them, and followed every rule about keeping livestock on properties larger than 3 acres, or at least I thought we did. The letter left me uneasy, but I tried to push it aside. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe someone had complained because they didn't understand horses. Whatever it was, I figured it would blow over. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of a battle I never saw coming. 2 weeks after the letter arrived, I was starting to feel like I'd imagined the whole thing. Life went on as usual. Daisy and Buck grazed happily in their paddock. The kids played in the yard, and Matt mowed the lawn every Saturday morning like clockwork. The horses were thriving, and aside from a few curious glances from neighbors passing by, no one seemed overly concerned about them. Maybe it really was just a misunderstanding, I thought. Maybe the HOA would forget all about it. But then Karen showed up. I'll never forget the day she walked into our driveway uninvited, clipboard in hand and sunglasses perched on her nose like she owned the place. She looked like she'd stepped straight out of a catalog for suburban perfection. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her outfit matching the color scheme of her car, and her heels clicking loudly against the pavement, despite being completely impractical for walking on grass. "Hi, Sarah," she called out cheerfully, though there was something forced about her smile. Lovely weather we're having, isn't it? I forced a polite nod, even though my instincts told me this wasn't a friendly visit. Hey, Karen, what brings you here? Oh, just checking in, she said breezily, waving her pen around like it was a magic wand. You know, making sure everything's up to standard. Up to standard. My stomach clenched at her words. Before I could respond, she turned her attention to the paddock where Daisy and Buck stood lazily munching hay. Her lips pursed slightly, and she tilted her head as if inspecting a piece of art she didn't quite approve of. There, nice, she said finally, her tone dripping with insincerity. But have you considered how much work they are? Horses can be messy, you know, and expensive. Are you sure you're equipped to handle them properly? My jaw tightened. We've been taking care of them just fine, I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. They're part of the family. Karen gave me a patronizing smile that made my blood boil. Well, that's sweet, but let's not forget, they're technically on HOA property. According to Section 4.7 of the guidelines, any enhancements or features added to an HOA-approved lot become shared community resources. I blinked, stunned. Shared. What? She leaned in closer, speaking slowly as if explaining something complicated to a child. Think of it this way. Since your land is part of Willow Creek, anything on it, including those horses, technically belongs to the community. You're basically housing communal assets. Communal assets. My mind raced as I tried to process what she was saying. Are you serious right now? They're my asterisk horses. We bought them. We feed them. We take care of them. How does that make them community property? Karen shrugged, her expression smug. It's all in the rules, dear. If you want clarification, you can bring it up at the next HOA meeting. And just like that, she spun on her heel, clicking away in her ridiculous heels without another word. I stood frozen in the driveway, staring after her as anger bubbled inside me. Who did she think she was? Those horses weren't some decoration or feature. They were living, breathing creatures. They had names, personalities, and a place in our family. The idea of anyone else claiming ownership over them felt absurd and infuriating. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Karen's smug face and heard her condescending voice echoing in my head. Was she serious about this? Could the HOA really claim my horses belonged to them? It sounded insane, but deep down, I knew better than to dismiss it. This neighborhood thrived on rules, and Karen clearly loved enforcing them. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. If they wanted to play games, fine, but they had no idea who they were messing with. Whatever battle was coming, I was ready. Little did I know, things were about to escalate faster than I ever imagined. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, and I knew I couldn't avoid it. Karen had made her intentions clear. She wasn't going to let this go quietly. The thought of sitting in a room full of people who might side with her made my stomach churn, but I refused to back down. Daisy and Buck weren't just horses. They were part of our lives, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from us. When we arrived at the community center, the atmosphere felt tense. Neighbors greeted each other politely, but there was an undercurrent of unease. Everyone seemed to know why we were here. As Matt and I took our seats near the back, I noticed Karen already positioned at the front of the room, chatting animatedly with Mr. Caldwell, the HOA president. She looked confident, almost smug, as if she'd already won before the discussion even began. "Good evening, everyone," Mr. Caldwell said once everyone had settled in. His voice carried authority, though his tone was calm and measured. "Tonight, we have a few items on the agenda, but first, I'd like to address a concern raised by one of our members regarding livestock compliance." Karen stood up immediately, smoothing her skirt before turning to face the room. Her smile was bright, but there was something sharp behind it, a gleam of determination that set my teeth on edge. "As many of you may know," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Willow Creek prides itself on maintaining certain standards. These standards ensure that our neighborhood remains beautiful, cohesive, and desirable for all residents. She paused dramatically, letting her words sink in. However, recent developments have raised questions about whether some properties are truly adhering to these principles. My hands clenched into fists under the table. This was it. She continued, pulling out a document from her folder. According to Section 4.7 of the Willow Creek Living Standards, any improvements or enhancements made to HOA-approved lots, including structures, landscaping, and yes, even livestock, are considered shared community resources. Now, while I understand that owning animals can be a personal choice, we must also consider the impact they have on the overall aesthetic and value of the neighborhood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors exchanged nervous glances, while others nodded along like they agreed with her. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about me. It was about standing up for what was right. Before I could say anything, Karen turned directly toward me. For example, she said, gesturing vaguely in my direction, "Daisy and Buck are lovely creatures, of course. But technically speaking, since they reside on HOA property, they'd fall under collective ownership. Think of it as asset management." Asset management. My jaw dropped. How dare she reduce living beings to nothing more than property? Before I could respond, Mr. Caldwell stepped in, attempting to diffuse the tension. "Let's table this discussion for now," he suggested diplomatically. "We'll review the documentation and reconvene next week." As the meeting adjourned, Karen shot me a triumphant glance, clearly pleased with herself. I wanted to scream, or maybe throw something, but instead, I turned to Matt. "We're not losing the horses," I whispered fiercely. "Not to her." He nodded grimly. "Then we fight dirty." On the drive home, my mind raced. Karen thought she had the upper hand, but she hadn't counted on one thing. I wasn't the kind of person to roll over and give up without a fight. If she wanted to treat my horses like property, fine. I'd show her exactly what that meant, and make her regret ever starting this battle. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, an idea began to take shape in my mind. Karen wanted to treat Daisy and Buck like community property. Fine, I'd give her exactly what she was asking for, but on my terms. If the HOA thought they owned my horses, then it was only fair that they also took responsibility for everything that came with owning them. And trust me, taking care of 2 horses wasn't cheap. The next morning, I sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook and started drafting an invoice. Matt wandered in halfway through, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "What are you doing?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. "Giving Karen a taste of her own medicine," I replied with a sly grin. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. By the time I finished, the document looked official, almost too good to be real. At the top, bold letters declared, *** boarding agreement for community-owned assets, Daisy and Buck ***. Below, I listed every expense associated with keeping horses, broken down into neat categories. Daily feed, $25 per horse. Hay bales, $10 each. Veterinary care, $50 monthly fee. Farrier services, $75 per trim. Pasture maintenance, $200 monthly. At the bottom, I added up the numbers. Total due, $5,000 ***. Matt whistled low when he saw the final amount. "You're really sending this?" "Absolutely," I said, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into an envelope. "If Karen thinks Daisy and Buck belong to the HOA, then the HOA can start footing the bill." I delivered the invoice personally, sliding it under Karen's front door with a note attached. *Per HOA policy, please remit payment within 30 days to cover ongoing expenses for Daisy and Buck. Thank you for your cooperation. For the rest of the day, I waited anxiously for her reaction. Would she laugh it off? Ignore it completely? Or would she come storming over demanding answers? Part of me hoped for the latter. It would be worth it just to see the look on her face. Sure enough, late that afternoon, I heard the unmistakable sound of high heels clicking against the pavement outside. Looking out the window, I saw Karen marching toward our driveway, her face flushed red with fury. She held the invoice in one hand, crumpled slightly from being gripped so tightly. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, waving the paper like it was a declaration of war. "This is outrageous." I leaned casually against the fence, pretending to sip coffee as though nothing unusual was happening. "Just following protocol, Karen," I said sweetly. "If Daisy and Buck belong to the HOA, then logically, the HOA should cover their expenses. Fair is fair." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't charge us for this. It's preposterous." "Oh, I think it's perfectly reasonable," I replied smoothly. "After all, you're the one who said they're community property. I'm simply holding up my end of the bargain." Neighbors began gathering, drawn by the commotion. Some looked amused, while others seemed genuinely curious about what was going on. Karen spun around, addressing the growing crowd. "Can you believe this? She thinks she can extort money from us." One older man chuckled. "Actually, it makes sense. If they're ours, we gotta pay for 'em." Karen's jaw dropped. For once, she had no comeback. Instead, she shot me a venomous glare before stomping back to her car, leaving behind a trail of muttered complaints. As her engine roared to life, and she sped off, I couldn't help but smile. Round one went to me, and judging by the whispers spreading among the neighbors, I wasn't the only one who thought Karen's obsession with rules had gone too far. This fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt like I might actually have a chance of winning. Word spread like wildfire. By the next morning, it seemed like everyone in Willow Creek knew about my $5,000 boarding bill to the HOA. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance suddenly stopped by under the guise of borrowing sugar or asking about the weather, but I could tell they were dying to hear more. Some even admitted they found the whole situation hilarious. "You really sent Karen an invoice?" one woman asked, trying and failing to stifle a laugh as she leaned over the fence. "Good for you. She's been running this neighborhood like her personal kingdom for years." Another neighbor, a retired man named Mr. Peterson, nodded approvingly. About time someone stood up to her. Maybe this will teach her not to meddle where she doesn't belong. Even Matt was surprised by how quickly things escalated. Copies of the invoice began circulating online, accompanied by snarky comments and memes featuring Daisy and Buck. One particularly popular post showed a photo of the horses grazing peacefully, captioned, "Will work for board fees." It got dozens of likes within hours. But while the neighborhood buzzed with amusement, Karen wasn't taking it lightly. The following day, she called an emergency HOA meeting, determined to regain control of the narrative. When Matt and I walked into the community center, the tension was palpable. Karen sat at the front of the room, flanked by Mr. Caldwell and a few other board members. Her expression was icy, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by barely concealed rage. "Let's get straight to the point," she announced as soon as everyone settled in. "This absurd claim that the HOA owes money for livestock is completely unacceptable. Horses are not community property, and we certainly aren't responsible for feeding them or paying their vet bills." Her voice rose sharply on the last sentence, drawing murmurs from the crowd. But instead of rallying support, her outburst only seemed to fuel skepticism. One man raised his hand hesitantly. "Actually, Karen, didn't you say at the last meeting that anything on HOA-approved land technically belongs to the community? That's what you told us about the horses, right?" Karen's face turned bright red. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before making such sweeping statements," another neighbor chimed in. "If the horses are communal assets, then yeah, we'd expect some kind of financial breakdown. Makes sense to me." The room erupted into chatter. People openly questioned whether Karen's interpretation of the rules was fair or even legal. Even Mr. Caldwell, who usually backed Karen without hesitation, looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat nervously and addressed the group. Perhaps we need to revisit Section 4.7 and clarify its language. This has clearly caused confusion. Karen shot him a betrayed look, but he avoided meeting her eyes. For the first time, cracks were appearing in her carefully constructed facade. She glanced around the room, searching for allies, but most people avoided her gaze altogether. Some were whispering among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. Others simply smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle. As the meeting dragged on, it became clear that Karen's authority was slipping. What started as a petty dispute over horses had turned into something bigger, a challenge to the very foundation of her power. By the time the meeting adjourned, she was visibly shaken, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. Before leaving, she shot me a venomous glare that promised retaliation. But I didn't care. For the first time since moving to Willow Creek, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. In the days following the disastrous HOA meeting, Karen seemed to disappear from public view. Her usual morning walks through the neighborhood stopped, and her perfectly manicured lawn grew slightly overgrown, a detail that didn't escape the notice of gossiping neighbors. "Looks like she's too busy sulking to trim her hedges," one woman joked as we chatted over coffee. It was clear that my boarding bill had struck a nerve, not just with Karen but with the entire community. Rumors began swirling about what Karen was doing behind closed doors. Some said she spent hours drafting petitions to reinstate stricter enforcement of the rules, though no one seemed interested in signing them. Others claimed she was trying to rally support for a special vote to remove non-compliant residents, namely, me. But even her closest allies appeared to distance themselves. One afternoon, I spotted her talking animatedly to Mr. Caldwell near the clubhouse, only for him to hold up his hands in surrender and walk away mid-conversation. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't working. Meanwhile, life in Willow Creek started changing, in small but noticeable ways. The relentless focus on trivial rules began to loosen. Fines for minor infractions slowed to a trickle, and some long-standing complaints were quietly dropped. A neighbor who'd been fined repeatedly for painting her front door teal received a letter stating her case had been reviewed and resolved. Another family finally got approval for a backyard playset they'd requested months earlier. It wasn't a revolution, but it felt like progress. At the next HOA meeting, the atmosphere was markedly different. When Karen tried to bring up the issue of livestock compliance again, she was met with polite indifference or outright mockery. "Karen, seriously," one man interrupted, barely hiding his smirk. "Do we really need to waste more time talking about horses? Half the streetlights are still out." Even Mr. Caldwell seemed exasperated. "Perhaps we've taken things too far," he admitted reluctantly, much to everyone's surprise. "Maybe it's time to revisit certain policies and focus on what truly matters." Karen sputtered protests, but her arguments fell flat. People openly rolled their eyes or whispered sarcastic comments under their breath. By the end of the meeting, it was clear. Her grip on the neighborhood was slipping. She stormed out without another word, leaving behind a room buzzing with newfound optimism. As for me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. My little stunt hadn't just exposed the absurdity of Karen's claims, it had sparked a shift in perspective. Neighbors who once feared crossing her now realized they weren't alone in their frustrations. Slowly but surely, Willow Creek was becoming less about rules and more about people. Still, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Would Karen retaliate? File a lawsuit? Move forward with some drastic plan to reclaim her authority? But weeks passed, and nothing happened. Eventually, rumors surfaced that she was considering moving to another neighborhood, one rumored to be even stricter than ours. Whether true or not, it brought a smile to my face every time I thought about it. Daisy and Buck remained happily in their paddock, blissfully unaware of the chaos they'd inspired. Watching them graze peacefully each evening, I often reflected on how far we'd come. What started as a ridiculous claim about community property had turned into something bigger, a reminder that sometimes standing your ground, even in the smallest ways, can make all the difference. Weeks turned into months, and life in Willow Creek settled into a new rhythm, one that felt less suffocating and more human. The HOA didn't vanish entirely, of course. It still held meetings, issued guidelines, and occasionally sent out reminders about overgrown lawns or parking violations. But the iron grip Karen had once wielded was gone, replaced by a quieter, more reasonable approach. Rules became suggestions rather than mandates, and people seemed happier for it. Karen eventually did move away, though she never admitted it publicly. Her house sold quickly to a young family who painted the front door bright yellow, a color that would have sent Karen into a tailspin just months earlier. When I passed by their home one afternoon, I noticed a cheerful sign hanging above the porch. "Welcome to our happy place." It made me smile. Willow Creek was finally starting to feel like a place where individuality could coexist with community. As for Daisy and Buck, they remained the stars of our little corner of the neighborhood. Neighbors who used to glance at them skeptically now stopped by regularly to say hello, bringing apples or carrots as treats. One elderly woman even started volunteering to help clean the paddock, claiming it gave her something to do after retirement. "Besides," she said with a wink, "I figure it's easier to keep these two happy than deal with another Karen situation." The kids loved the attention, too. They took pride in showing off their riding skills and teaching curious neighbors how to brush the horses' coats or check their hooves. Watching them beam with confidence reminded me why we'd fought so hard to keep Daisy and Buck in the first place. They weren't just animals. They were part of what made our family whole. Matt and I often joked about framing the infamous $5,000 invoice and hanging it on the wall as a trophy. "Best investment we ever made," he'd say, grinning. And in a way, he was right. That single act of defiance hadn't just protected our horses. It had given us a voice in a place where we'd once felt powerless. But perhaps the most surprising change was in the neighborhood itself. People began talking to each other more, not just polite small talk, but real conversations. Someone organized a block party, complete with potluck dishes and a makeshift stage for local musicians. Another neighbor started a community garden, inviting everyone to plant flowers or vegetables. Even Mr. Caldwell loosened up, occasionally joining in on weekend barbecues and cracking jokes about his past obsession with perfectly symmetrical hedges. Looking back, I realized that the battle over Daisy and Buck had been about more than just horses. It was about challenging the idea that perfection came at the cost of personality. By standing up to Karen, I hadn't just defended my family. I'd helped create space for others to do the same. Willow Creek wasn't perfect anymore, but it didn't need to be. Its imperfections, the quirky mailboxes, the mismatched curtains, the occasional barking dog, were what made it real. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast golden light over the paddock, I leaned against the fence watching Daisy and Buck graze peacefully. Matt joined me, handing over a mug of hot cocoa. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "we might have gotten more than we bargained for when we moved here." I smiled, taking the sip. "Yeah, turns out fighting for something you love can make all the difference." And as the cool breeze rustled through the trees and the sound of laughter echoed from down the street, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be.